Welcome back to Round 3 Studio, April 20th, 2025. We're continuing a conversation in part 2 with Allie, sharing her testimony. We left off with talking about that you can't have true forgiveness without Jesus.
Yeah. And, you start, when you think that you're forgiving, but you're not actually, you build this real false sense of, one, closeness with people, but two, a real understanding of your emotions. You really lose track of like why you're so bitter. And you're just like, I just can't understand why I'm so just in pain like over this relationship. Like it doesn't ever seem to be enough. And it's because those moments still exist. Like that still happened. It's still in there. The wound is still very real. You're just slapping this band-aid on a bullet wound and going like, well, I forgave, so I guess I have to move on, but I don't really feel any different. And you kind of just end up disliking each other.
Not true reconciliation.
Yeah.
Especially continuing to do the drugs that just kind of, like you say, a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah, you're just masking so much of just the reality of what you're up against. So with that buildup, you're just feeling so much negativity and wondering, why are we doing this? Is this really what marriage is supposed to look like? Why don't I feel the love that I feel like I'm supposed to? Why don't I feel loved in return? And this was like year 1. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is like, we got a long way to go. And I was so just resolved, like, against divorce. You guys had given us such a good example of what you went through, where you just didn't give up. And you just dug in, and you dug in for different reasons. We talked about this the other day, where like sometimes your reason is for your kids, sometimes your reason is for God. Like you just kind of have to lean on what you have to lean on to get through this. And I really took away that reason. Yeah. Sometimes. And it's worth it, and like digging in is worth it. The grass is not greener. It's just not. You've got to do the work. Everybody's got problems. And so I had that, in this marriage where I'm like, I'm not going to give up. And I was always so stubborn anyway that I was like, I can do this. I can do this. But I cannot do it in my own strength. And we reached a point where we're going on these benders. You're totally out of touch with reality. And Mom and I at that point had begun reconnecting. And it hasn't been until like years later out of this that I realized so heavily how much like the weight of prayer was happening over my life. Because you guys never stopped praying. Grandpa and Grandma never stopped praying. It's things that I didn't know, where I look back and I'm like, wow, I like really did have people warring for me. And Mom was willing to do the work with me to come back into relationship because we were so on the outs. And
that was a really hard time to get there.
It was hard. I felt like such a disappointment to her. And I've always had so much respect for Mom. I think she's she's so resilient and like such a great person. Like I have so much love and respect for her, and she takes no prisoners. And so as the kid of that, I never wanted to go to war with her, but I also felt so bad about myself that I could not justify myself to her ever. And I just never felt like I was good enough, and felt like a failure. So I really hid from her. I really did. I mean, she would sit there and be like, I know something is going on with you. I can see it on your face. And I'd be like, nope.
She definitely has the gift of discernment.
Yes.
Very strongly.
She does. She does. And there was the incident right where I came home from college and I had weed in my car, and she found it, of course, which is, it's so ironic to me seeing the places that God allowed things, because it was the only time I ever brought weed home, and I actually forgot to take it out. And I had like rules around you guys because I respected you enough to like not bring it into your house. And it was the one time that I forgot to take it out of my car that she went digging around and found it, and turned me into the cops. And
If
I
I
was
remember right,
just,
she actually went in out to your car to get something
she was
that
looking.
you said was out there, and then she came across
Probably,
it.
yeah, I probably wasn't even like, she went looking. I probably was like, go grab that. Like, no. Um, and yeah, that was really tough, because it's my uncle, whom I respect greatly.
Who was the sheriff?
Well, yeah, the sheriff, but also my uncle. And I knew I didn't have enough to be in trouble. I only had about a gram. And I was
And
like,
your grandpa was dispatching.
well, and this is the crazy thing. I was at the sheriff's office visiting grandpa. I was already there. And I was just like, I cannot believe this. This is like ridiculous. And I really had to pay the piper on that. I had to sit there and I was so humiliated. You know what I mean? This thing that I'm hiding, I'm so shameful about. I've been found out, and I haven't. And I think there was an element in there where, in it, I wasn't even treated with grace. And Mom and I have, we've reconciled everything. She's my best friend, but she said that like she wished she could handle that differently, and we'd had talks after of like what you guys maybe missed that could have been better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's hard. It's hard because I was very rebellious at that point. But I think instead of just going straight to the like, I knew it, and you're gonna go to jail, just like your life's gonna be a train wreck, all that stuff. I just wish somebody had been like, it's okay. I love you. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't really get that. Grandpa did.
Mm-hmm.
He always did. I got the best of him. You know what I mean? Because I just got grandpa.
Wisdom comes with age.
Yeah, and he had so much patience, because he was there, and he was the one where I was like, I would rather die than have to tell him what I have been up to, because he was the one where I was like, he had been gracious with me.
Mm-hmm.
He had so much patience for me. So I was like, oh, that's like my worst nightmare. Like, of all the things on earth, is having to feel like a disappointment to him,
Mm-hmm.
of all people. And he was like, that's okay. I love you. And I was just like, ah. It just, that broke me, because that's what I needed. I needed somebody to be like, it doesn't matter. Like,
We all make mistakes.
yeah, your choices don't dictate your value.
Yeah.
Because that just was not it for me. My value is 100% tied to my choices. And that is just so opposite of Jesus. Jesus is like, I love you because you're mine, because I created you from the dust to be mine. Like, his heart is so generous with us and our mistakes. So to track that back to Mom and I's relationship, though, that really did hammer it home for me that I was never going to be good enough for her, and that rather than disappointing her and trying to pretend to be good, I just really stepped back from our relationship at that time. I just pretty much, I didn't go no contact, but pretty limited contact. And I just wouldn't tell her the truth at all. I just lied. I'm good. I'm doing this fun thing with my friends this weekend, and I'm actually high all weekend, drinking, trying to run away from the shame. And so there was a lot of damage there of that. One, I thought for a long time that I would like upset her so much by being truthful that I couldn't be truthful because she couldn't handle it. Because she'd like, lose her mind on me and be so disappointed I just couldn't deal with that weight. And so what happened is mom really let me, I think, kind of beat her up a little bit. I think really is what it is. She really allowed me to tell her things about herself that probably weren't true. We had a conversation where, we both were kind of like, well, we want to have a relationship. And what is that going to have to look like? And I told her, I need to be able to tell you everything that I feel about you. And I told her, and I don't want to hear your response. I do not care. I need to be able to tell you what I think. And I did. And I am sure it was so hurtful in that moment because it's so not true about like her heart as a mother, but it was just my vantage point. And she allowed me to do that. And I told her, I will be honest with you about my use of substance, but I don't want any judgment. I do not want to hear your opinion, but I just want to be able to be honest with you. And she did that, would let me say, yeah, I've been high all weekend. And I tamed it down a little bit. I was still kind of taming it down for her heart. And there would be times where she would say, okay, thank you for telling me. And then after, reconciliation, learning that she would like be going to the Lord, crying, just like, Lord. And, but that worked, that system worked because she was going to God. And he was giving her the strength to deal with me. And there was enough of just an inkling in my heart that I wanted family and I wanted reconciliation that I kept being honest, and it really did begin to rebuild our trust. That I could tell her what was going on. And then there's like the big doozy moment. So my husband and I were still fighting, just always on the outs. So many feelings of just being unloved, and, not being able to love either. And I remember my house just felt so dark and just felt like that there were demons, just so much darkness. And, when you're under the influence, like you don't feel good, like, that you are kind of running from something. It's not so blasé because you come down, and so you do have to reckon with like a lot of intensity of like darkness that you've been inviting into your life. And so just in that cycle, just continuously. And you had gotten me a Bible and I hadn't opened it yet. And I was just in a place of real brokenness in my marriage. And I got out my Bible and I opened it, and it was just where they drop that bookmark in the middle of it when they make them. And it opened to Psalm 91. And I prayed that passage just through my house. And looking back, I'm pretty sure that I was high, which I just find so funny, like how Jesus was so good to me in all of that. Where like I was never alone, even when I felt so alone. You feel like you are, but you just really aren't. You really aren't. Like he really is there. And so I'm proclaiming this passage, and I want to read it because for me it's been so important. This has been like a life's motto, now at this point. But just a few key pieces. So it starts with, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. And it goes into this, beautiful thing about how he's going to take care of you. And it's incredible. And it ends with, Because he has loved me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him securely on high because he has known my name. He will call upon me and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With a long life, I will satisfy him and let him see my salvation. And this was the first scripture I'd read in a long time. And I think it's some of the first scripture that I ever really stood on with such a limited idea of what I was standing on. But it was such a cry for help. And I just was like, okay, just put this out there. And I prayed a prayer in that place. And I said, God, whatever you have to do to save this marriage, do it, even if we have to go to jail. And I remember saying those words and asking myself if I really meant that. Like, I remember there being a thing of like, do I mean that? Like, would I be willing to go there for that? And I did. I really meant it. I was like, yeah, it's worth it to me. You know, you guys, you and Mom had modeled such determination in the rough spots of your marriage to keep going through, not to give up, to lean on God if that's what you need to lean on. Or like, as you had said, like, sometimes you lean on your, for your children or like whatever.
Just find a reason to keep fighting because it's worth it.
Yeah. And that model always stuck with me. That was something so big that I took away from you guys walking that road, was that it was worth it to fight it out. You know, it was worth it to believe that the grass is not greener on the other side of the fence, that this is the person that God has for me, and being able to see the vision of what you believe they can be. You know, it's like, why do you stick it out, for so many things? And it's like, because I believe the best for you. I really can see it.
I've always believed that if the grass looks greener on the other side of the fence, it's probably because you haven't watered yours.
Yeah. And
if you go the other side of the fence with those bad habits, that grass is going to turn brown.
Well, so true. And what does it mean to water the grass? It's hard. It's work. So with that in mind, I was so committed to my marriage, even in like real struggle. I just wasn't going to quit, and I was stubborn. So I also wasn't going to quit for that either. And so in praying that, I really meant it. Lord, I'm willing to like go there for this marriage if you will make something miraculous happen. Didn't think that it could ever mean what it was going to mean, but in a few weeks later.
And you had moved back to Colorado, or you were living in Boulder at that time.
Yeah, we were living in Boulder, and we were up in the mountains in a trap house. And a few weeks later, we got a knock on the door, and SWAT team came in, raided us, and just turns your whole world upside down, because it's a lifestyle. Your entire network is built around it. And
you guys were growing marijuana there illegally.
Yeah, allegedly. No, allegedly. And just totally, you just have to reckon with the reality of what's been put in front of you. And I've always believed strongly that you are 100% responsible for the consequences that come from your choices. So I was willing, I was like, yeah, you take that risk. It's a part of the risk. You obviously don't think it's going to happen, but you take the risk
until you pray it.
until you ask the Lord to do it. So crazy. Oh my gosh. And so then we're in a place where, we're totally cut off. And it's not like you can keep doing business. And so we called you, and you came and you moved us out, and we moved in with you guys. And we lovingly call it rehab at Mom and Dad's now, since we're far enough out. But that time was so healing, because we were coming from a very broken place, and we'd been in hiding, you're in so much secrecy. You guys never really knew the full extent.
Mhm.
I was telling mom about my use. I wasn't really telling her about my
Right.
lifestyle. It's totally different at that
Right.
point. And yeah, we were just like totally found out. And it was a lot to reckon with, of like being honest about the things you're so shameful about.
Mhm.
And I had to be willing, not even willing, I didn't have a choice, but it was a time where I had to allow myself to be judged, where I'd been so careful
Yeah.
not to be.
And we had suspected, I mean, we had our suspicions. We weren't totally naive.
Yeah.
So when all that came out, it was just confirmed. We're like, yeah, we were pretty sure.
Yeah, I think you always think you're being more,
Yeah.
cautious than you
Discreet.
really are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the big factor that happened, because our relationship really healed during that time, was that in being judged, you guys had been on your own journey with Christ of really experiencing his grace. And I
Mhm.
wasn't, I'd moved out by then. So
And healing and reconciliation
yeah.
from
And I
our own
wasn't
struggles.
aware basically that you guys
Mhm.
changed a little bit. Not
Right.
really.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of deep interactions through that time till then.
Yeah. And I wasn't, capable of it, I don't think anyway. But yeah, and experiencing judgment from you guys, I fully expected just shame and condemnation. And I'm such a disappointment because that's how I felt.
Which is interesting that you had willingly subjected yourself to that under that premise, to come to live with us for a while,
Yeah.
not knowing that we had changed, but having the kind of the idea that we were still,
Yeah. It was,
high expectations and
totally the Lord to create that space.
true humility.
Yeah, I mean, we just, we got the rug swept out from under us, your money's gone. Like you're, yeah, you're calling
Mhm.
your parents to see if you can move in. And you guys treated us with such grace during that time. And experiencing that from you guys for the first like real time of having something like really ugly to have to
Mhm.
show you, and just getting so much grace. You guys were so understanding and kind and non-judgmental, full of, though, still wisdom and rebuke from the place of love, of, not at all enabling, not at all validating, in a way of like, oh, it's okay, but saying like, I still love you. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, you're gonna get through this. Yeah, I'm stupid, and you're paying for your mistakes, but I still love you.
And you're on the right track. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys believed in
Yeah.
us, and you really invested in us in that time, and we spent so many dinner times just talking through
Mhm.
our feelings and our, brief conceptions, and that was so huge. Just God really gave us a gift there. And, from there, we got an opportunity to work in the legal marijuana market. So, because the thing is, you still have talents
Mhm.
that are catering to that. So it's hard. You don't have any other,
Mhm.
talents. And it is hard to start from scratch. It's a little
Mhm.
humbling to be like, okay, I don't have any skills, even though I do. And so, naturally, we're like the legal market, legal. So we had an opportunity in front of us to start over and do things right and get the W-2 and do stuff
Mhm.
right like that. And so we moved back out to Colorado on the Western Slope. And, Mike and I are still really on the outs, lots of fighting, really struggling to come to grips with like what had happened. We're on probation at that point in Colorado. And with probation, I ended up with this probation officer who I don't think ever looked at my case file more than the first day. And I had a drug testing schedule, so you call a random number every morning, and they tell you yes, no, and then you find out if you're going to test for the day. So it's rigged. You have very little to get away with. And
And you only ended up with a misdemeanor too,
yeah, I got really
which could have been a lot
fortunate.
worse.
Yeah, the initial charges versus what I actually got were, yeah, God really had some grace and mercy on me there. But so I missed me a charge, and I ended up with this probation testing where I was getting called on to go drug test 3 to 4 times a week. And I found out later I was on this for 2 years and never got it dropped. And I'm testing clean the whole time. But I should know I'm in Colorado, and so you can get a medical marijuana card.
Mm-hmm.
And per the state, any prescription, whatever, if you have a prescription, if you test hot, they won't count it against you. So I was still smoking weed, and I was the only real vice I had at that point. Everything else was popping. And so I'm clean everywhere else except for there, and testing just crazy amounts. And I found out later, I called my probation officer finally, and I had probably about 2 or 3 months left. And I just said, hey, this is getting really expensive because you pay for your own test. And, I've been clean this whole time. Like, is there any way you can consider dropping me down a little bit? And she took a look at it and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're testing that much. And come to find out, I had a testing set that was where it should have been for like repeat felony offenders. And which I think was just, God was just not going to let me get away with stuff, because you can play around with it. You can. If you're only getting tested once a week, well, some things only stay in your system 24 hours. So I really just could not push the line. And when you're looking at sobriety, and the law is like the hammer that drops instead of, your own little guilt and shame thing, it's a totally different driver. You're like, yeah, I'll, be uncomfortable for that. Albeit I still had a vice. And so anyway, that really progressed that sobriety work very quickly, quicker than it would have been had I not.
Just interesting because your mom and I's prayer through a lot of that time, before you even came, because you were out of our influence, that we just pray that God would just not let you get away with stuff, that you'd get caught. And so it's interesting that He worked in that way to even your testing was more than what it should have been to keep you kind of
He kept me
accountable.
honest. He really kept me honest. And through that, you have a new leaf turned over, and there's a lot of sobriety work happening, and you're trying to be a good citizen. And between Mike and I, we wanted to work through our problems, and so it's really led to like the defining moment, I would say. So we started going to church again, and it was very surface. It was like yes, we were both kind of raised in, I was very raised in church. He was kind of raised in church. And so we both were like, well, it's good input. It's good moral value. And I was really at a place where my heart, I really wanted to be a good person. And the only way I knew how to be good was going to be these rules and regulations of Christianity. They were the best out there. So I was kind of willing to like bring myself back under that umbrella and try to be a good Christian girl. And we're going to church one day, and mind you, I'm still operating heavily under legalism. So much guilt and shame. And I'm wrestling with guilt and shame more than I have in a long time, because I'm ready to kind of face it. So it is like in your face how much of a failure you are when you're ready to kind of look at it a little bit. And we go to church, and it just so happens to be Communion Sunday. And there's this teaching, and I don't want to say it's skewed because it's biblical, but I think it misses elements about communion where I'd heard all the time growing up, Communion Sunday, first thing that was presented, do not take communion if you have sinned against anybody. As a kid, I'm looking at my brother and I'm like, my brother just hit him this morning, or called him a loser. So you're constantly, as a kid, you're constantly sinning. There's no way to be like,
Right.
I haven't sinned against anybody, or did I lie? And so I like, oh, Communion Sunday. And my husband and I walk into church, and he kind of said something, and I had a smart aleck comment, and it was rude and hurtful, and he was offended. And we go into church, and I'm feeling bad. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. What the heck? Here we are at church. Like, I'm just, I just feel like such an awful person. I just can't control myself. Apologizing to him. We get into the pew, and they're like, it's Communion Sunday. And immediately that teaching just boom. You can't take communion because you just offended him. He's been offended, and you need to get forgiveness before you can do this. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, please forgive me. I'm so sorry. That was so mean. And I know it. I'm really trying to express, I know, well, that was so mean. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And he was mad, and he was right to be so. And he was not ready to forgive me. And it was kind of like, it's fine, but he's mad, and I can tell that I haven't really been forgiven. And so we sit down, they hand out the communion stuff, and I'm holding it, and I just knew in my heart, according to that rule, I can't take communion. Like, oh my gosh, I screwed it up again. I'm such a screw up. Once again, can't live up to the standard. And my heart wanted so badly to partake. And in hindsight, it's so funny to me because it was purely symbolic to me at that point. Communion was just symbolic. But I wanted to take it so badly, even out of just symbolism. And they kind of start going through everything of, this is what the cup means. And I just sit down and I just close my eyes because I'm like, I can't take this. And in my heart,
And they'd already passed it out.
Yeah, they'd already passed it out. And you never want to not take it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Once they give it to you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like there's a bit of a thing there where you're
embarrassing.
not going to be like, no, I cannot take this. That's a bit much. So I've already got it, and I just sit down and I close my eyes, and something in my heart just broke because I wanted it so badly, and it just broke me because I just could not do well. I just couldn't be good enough. I couldn't meet the standard, and I was just heartbroken in that moment of just like, am I ever going to be able to do this? Be a part of this? Be a part of this community? Be a Christian? And so I just put my head down and I just prayed. I just said, Jesus, defend me. Jesus, help me. Help me. And had my eyes closed, and I'm looking, just eyes closed, just praying this, and just totally dejected, just like heart broke. And what it was just truly like a place of surrender, of just a true, just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. Jesus, help me. And I really meant it. And I've got my eyes closed and I'm praying this. And Jesus, and I'm like crying, and Jesus appears before me. And in that moment, he's standing before me. And I felt just this power of his presence just push into me. And it was external. It didn't come up within me. I've never experienced anything like it since, except for like in just amazing moments of prayer. But I'd never, leading up to that point, ever felt anything like that. And I just felt this love push through me, like this love that was so unconditional that I knew this love that could see every part of me, but still like chose to be there, that he still chose to be there and chose to show up. And just this overwhelming kindness of who he is, and it's not like the kindness we talk about, like it just flows out of Jesus. Like that is just who he is. It's not a moment that he expresses. That's how we express it. We express love in a moment. We express kindness in a moment. Jesus is love and kindness. I mean, it was just like the power that just bowled over every preconception I had in my heart. And the thing that he broke through when that happened were the walls that I had built and the identity that I had given to Christ. And he broke down these walls about everything that I ever thought that he was and what he could do and why he would do it. And he just shattered it all, because in that moment, he's there in front of me. And I didn't think that he could be there. I just sinned against my husband. And there he is. And I've got my head bowed. And he put his hand on my head and he gave me the cup. And I drank the cup. And totally changed the way I view communion, first of all.
Yeah.
Communion is so real. Now when I go into communion, I'm like, I am in the presence of the Lord. This is not symbolic. You really are in the presence of Jesus. So beautiful. But he broke down all of these preconceptions about him. And I prayed, and I'm like shaking and weeping and totally shook to my core. Like I can't even put into words well enough what that was like. It's so hard to describe. But, I'm just totally overwhelmed. And I just prayed. And I basically just told Jesus that I'm not going to try to tell you who you are anymore. And I was wrong. I was wrong about what I thought, because in him showing up and giving me communion, hallelujah, Lord, giving me communion, he challenged everything I ever thought. He challenged the belief that he wouldn't love me, couldn't love me. Challenged that right away. And that shook the tree. That shook all the stuff of if I was good enough to be loved, if my purity had, put me at distance from God forever, like so many things about my identity, because I built my identity around trying to be good enough so that I could be deserving of love.
Wow.
Yeah, so to just receive love without earning it for the first time in that way, to the one whom I so desperately want to please and so desperately want to know, and for him to show up in that way, I just knew I was wrong. I knew it, that something about my structure and his identity, I didn't know, obviously, because here he is. And I thought that communion thing was like rock solid. That's like the scripture is clear, and I'm like, and here he is. What? And it just shook me up. It shook me up. And I felt a depth of love and acceptance in that moment where I live my life. And I hope I live my life this way, I should say. I want to live my life this way, but it is my heart's desire to be back in that place. Because being in the presence of Jesus is like,
no better place to be.
It's true. We say that as like a quip, but I'm telling you, like when you're there, like nothing can touch you. All your fallacies about yourself, all your worries about the world, your future, if you're going to be good enough, if you're doing a good job, if you're going to make it to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
all these things, like it all goes away, and it is just the presence of him, and it pushes through and past you, and you become encapsulated in his goodness, and none of that stuff can touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it does not hold a flame to the power of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. That's that true unconditional love that nothing can separate us from, that the scriptures talk about. It's like he came in and he completely shattered your legalism, completely shattered your own merit to try to earn his grace. I mean, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us.
Amen.
So, wow, what a powerful vision that he gave you. Like, yeah, that's incredible. Like, just picturing Jesus serving me communion I was like, wow, it's totally different.
It'll flip it on its head for you.
Right? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for this segment, but thank you for joining us. Come back, and we're going to have a part 3 because there's more to Allie's story.